we have added 20 million cars without adding roads. We need lots of innovation to make it cheaper for customers. If our competitiveness hinges on having the cheapest energy prices in the world, we have a problem.
Welcome to The Big Question, the series from Euronews where we speak to some of the biggest names in business. I'm Hannah Brown, and today I'm joined by Leonard Birnbaum, CEO of E.ON and President of Eurelectric. Thank you very much for joining us. So let's start off looking at the big picture. What is your vision for European power over the next 10 years?
It's actually a very hard intro question. It would be easier to give you a vision for 2050, how a renewable future would actually provide us with secure, resilient energy supply, actually also in very competitive terms. The vision for the next 10 years must be, how do we get the transition towards that future done? One element would be, if it's a positive vision, that we have achieved more electrification, because more electrification means more decarbonization, but also more competitiveness.
Thinking about this future electrification, is the current infrastructure up to scratch to meet those energy and electricity demands?
No. If you think about the future, we need to continue to invest significantly into infrastructure. First, one has to say the electricity infrastructure in Europe, in a global comparison, is actually very good.
Brilliant.
So it's not that we are starting from a bad base, but it's a bit like the analogy to cars. Now we have added 20 million cars without adding roads, and then eventually you run into trouble. And that's the same which we have done. We have added massive renewables, and now the reserves of the systems are just gone, and we need to add more infrastructure, i.e. more electricity roads, so that we can continue with the transition. So the infrastructure is more of a bottleneck than the renewables.
So in terms of adding these electricity roads, I love that analogy, what investment is needed to get our infrastructure up to scratch?
Roughly twice as much as today. Let me just explain why. Today we have an electrification rate of 23%.
Okay.
Roughly a quarter of our energy consumption is electricity. To decarbonize, we need to go anywhere to maybe 60%. So let's say tripling.
Okay.
We have been investing as an industry across Europe roughly 35 billion euros per year into distribution, which is, in the road analogy, all the roads but the highways. Yeah? And then we have an additional 15 to 20 billion into the highways. Yeah? So two-thirds, one-third.
Yeah.
We need to go to close to 70 billion. So roughly twice as much for not 1 year or 2 years, for 20 to 25 years. So a lot more investments for a long time.
Obviously a lot of money. Who will pay for it?
In the end, consumers have to pay for it. And if not consumers, then taxpayers. But one of the two has to pay for it, because we can't actually swallow it as an industry. Just lower your margins. Because if I need to double investments, 30 billion, this is not the margin we're making, so it's impossible. We need to earn more so that we can invest more. And I would also make the point that even more expensive than investments is not investing. Because if we're not investing, then actually we get into the situation in which we have been 2 or 3 years ago. We get bottlenecks, we get then spiking prices, we get markets which can't actually work. And we have seen that the curtailment of energy to the lack of infrastructure is actually more expensive than adding the infrastructure. I can give you a number. In Germany, we are paying 4 billion a year only for curtailment, which is basically lack of infrastructure.
Yeah.
If I would take 4 billion as a depreciation, I could have invested 100 billion into an asset. And it would make much more sense to have 100 billion in an asset and have the depreciation than wasting 4 billion every year, which in the end, this money is just gone.
And you just mentioned it's a way to get more secure. In recent years, we've seen a lot of instability globally and conflicts. Can electrification help us to become more secure in times of crises and protect us from that?
Yes, it can, but there are two caveats. So it can, first, because it's more decentralized. So it's very hard to attack a decentralized system, which is also not depending on imports. Whilst, for example, we have seen that gas pipelines are vulnerable, right? Import pipelines are vulnerable. We have seen in the Red Sea that shipping is vulnerable. That all disappears if you go towards renewables. So yes, that can diversify, make you more resilient. The one caveat that you have is you need to work on cyber, because you're obviously building huge digital infrastructure, And this digital infrastructure will come under cyber attack. So you need to make it secure, you need to constantly work on the cyber issue.
And do you think that infrastructure is currently quite vulnerable?
To be very clear, cyber attacks on every infrastructure are the new normal. And it's not only electricity, every infrastructure is under constant attack, every company is under constant attack. And so the more important the electricity system comes, the more relevance it has for society to make sure that we protect it.
It's a long journey to get to 100% electricity, but how do we get there and how long do you think it will take?
On the electricity side, we are getting close. The current projections are that by 2040 we're basically fully renewable in electricity. And it depends now on the speed at which we transition to electric cars and to electric heating, heat pumps, how fast we can substitute fossils in the other sectors. But the current planning is that we will be done by that in 2050 in the EU.
In that transition, do all the technologies that we need already exist, or what else is needed?
That is an interesting question. Renewables exist. Distribution systems exist, and so you could say we have it. But I would argue we will probably see more innovation than we imagine. Like if 15 years ago you would have asked the same question, who would have told you, oh, AI would maybe be a good idea? And AI will be part of it. So I'm saying we have what we need to run, but I still believe that additional innovation will make the transition cheaper, and we need lots of innovation to make it cheaper for customers.
And finally, tell me a little bit more about the role that the power sector has to play in Europe's ability to be competitive.
Yeah, first I would say we should not reduce the competitiveness issue on Europe on energy prices. If our competitiveness hinges on having the cheapest energy prices in the world, we have a problem. And our competitiveness in reality is, threatened by the fact that we're not innovative enough, our infrastructure is not good enough, our demographics don't work in our favor, taxes are too high, and then energy is not cheap either. Second, we have to make sure that we supply secure and reliable energy. It's also very important. For example, data centers. For them, speed of connection and reliability is more important than price. And the second one is obviously, especially for energy-intensive industries, the quest will be how can we give them at least a price which makes them competitive at a global level. And this is also a task for the Commission to figure out how we can find the best way towards such a future.
Yeah, so quite a task ahead.
It's actually an exciting industry. I love it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today and for joining us on The Big Question.
Thank you very much.